You know, for the few weeks now in Advent, we're speaking honestly about Advent. We have been navigating how we can talk about the light even in the darkness, even when the darkness seems to be present and sometimes overwhelming. We've named what so many of us carry quietly, longing for things to be made right. Longing for relationships to be healed. Longing for a phone call that never comes. A diagnosis we hope for would be different. A loved one who will not be sitting in their usual seat tonight. Longing is a language of Advent because longing is a language of the human heart. Some of you walked into worship this night full of joy. And I saw that in the choir. Full of joy today, and the joy coming out, and anticipation of what's to come, whether it's family time or worship or just Jesus coming. Some of us came because Christmas Eve is where you go when you quite don't know where else to go. You might have come because this night feels thin and you want to fill it up with something, where heaven and earth feel closer and you are hoping, even if you can barely name it, you are looking for something where God might meet you here. That hope is not misplaced. There are things I have felt in Advent past personally. I don't think this is where I'd be. I didn't think that. I didn't think I'd be alone. I didn't think I'd be grieving. I didn't think my prayer would go unanswered. And how many of you have come into a night like this saying, oh, I didn't know that this wouldn't happen. I didn't know I'd be in this place at this time. I didn't want to be there. But Advent gives us permission to say these words out loud. And yet tonight, Christmas Eve, something shifts. Not because all the circumstances suddenly change in our lives, but because God enters in. The light we have been longing for does not arrive in a way that erases our struggle. It arrives in a way that moves into it, that chooses vulnerability. God chooses closeness. God chooses to be born into a world that is already complicated, already divided, already hurting. There was no room in the inn. Not because people were cruel, not because they were too busy or overwhelmed or distracted. Actually, I should have said the other way. They didn't come into the room at the end because people were cruel. They came because people were distracted. They were overwhelmed. And isn't that still true? God arrives not in ideal conditions, but in real ones. I think about a young mother I once knew who was raising her children, and one Christmas Eve she came in and money was very tight, and she wrapped the presents for the kids and as much as she could, hoping it would be enough. And later she came into my office and she talked to me and she said, I kept praying that they wouldn't notice what was missing. That is longing too, the longing to be enough, to provide enough to hold things together. But here's the good news of this night. The light of Christ does not come to point out what is missing. It comes to declare that God is present. The gospel tells us the word became flesh and lived among us. God did not stay at a safe distance. God came close enough to cry, close enough to need to be fed, close enough to need to be held, close enough to experience the world the way we do from the inside. That means there is no place where you are tonight or will be, where God has not already chosen to be. God is always present. Still, some of us may be wondering, if the light has come, why does it still feel dark? I think this night about those lying in a hospital, too weak to get up, those just transferred from a hospital to a rehab center tonight, as one of our members did. Those children out on the streets, hungry and cold. People frightened of violence toward them or their neighbors. I think of the first Christmas after a loss. The decorations feel heavy. The carols catch in your throat. You reach for a familiar place, familiar voice that is no longer there. And well-meaning people say things like this to you. Well, they're in a better place. When what you really want is for them to still be there. And you grapple with that loss. Well, we had a time for Christmas caroling to help bring some of this joy to the community, and it happened to be the coldest day of the year. So those of you who were there, you know we didn't go. We wimped out. Now, John Wesley and the founders of Methodism would have been out there, but not us. Instead, we stayed huddled in our warm fellowship hall and ate soup and whatnot. But somebody came up with a brilliant idea, and that was to take out our phones and to call people who weren't there, people who might have lost somebody, people who were alone. And together with the use of technology, phones lifted up in the air, as you see in some of those pictures, someone on the phone listening to and singing along with us. And there were more than one person who came up to me afterwards and said, the person that I called really needed this, and they were bawling and crying during that time, but weeping with joy. One particular family had a great granddaughter, a great child to come, granddaughters, mothers, and mothers-in-law there at the place, and they sang to a great grandpa, a grandpa, and a father who had just lost his wife in September, and Christmas was her very special time. And with tears running in his eyes, he sang the carols with us. Christmas Eve does not rush us past the pain. Instead, it offers a quieter truth. The darkness does not get the final word. Light wins. Imagine sitting in a dark room, power's out. What do? You go get a candle or a flashlight. But let's go back to the days when we didn't have the flashlights. But you get a candle. You might light a candle, right? My parents always had one of those big votives with the big flames and oil in it and whatnot. And they lit that and it lit up the room, right? What was once scary, what was once difficult, and we'd bump into things, now with a single light lit, filled the room with light, allowed us hope in the midst of that darkness. We didn't feel unsafe anymore. We could move around. We were no longer alone in the dark. And this is what happens tonight. The gospel says the light shines in darkness, and darkness does not overcome it. Not because darkness disappeared, but because it could not extinguish that light. In just a few minutes, we're going to be sharing the light of Christ, one person to another. One flame passed from person to person. And what is remarkable is this. The light is never diminished by being shared. When I lit this candle today, if you notice, it sent a flame over, but both had full light. In fact, the light becomes stronger because we share. That's how Christ's light works. It works in us. It shows up when someone sits quietly with a grieving friend and does not try to fix it. It shows up when forgiveness is offered even though it feels costly. It shows up when kindness is chosen in a world that rewards cruelty. It shows up when we keep loving even when our hearts have been broken before. I served in church, and there was a pastor friend that served alongside with me, and he told me this story. It was about this. They were having a Christmas Eve service, and there was a man who was a part of the church who wasn't really, he was technically on the rolls, but people didn't see him, even at Christmas and Easter. But he became sick, and he was a member. So on Christmas Eve, people were talking. They realized this man did not have any relatives in town, didn't have any family, and no one seemed to know him. And to be honest, he was kind of a standoffish guy. One of those people that you don't really want to talk to because they're always grumpy about something or they're going to complain about something. And so he didn't really have a group of friends either. And so after Christmas Eve service, a woman in the church said, hey, we should go sing carols to him because he got so sick, he was in the hospital, and he was rehabilitating. And people all kind of said, well, after some muttering, well, we got things to do, and we don't really want to go see him, and that kind of thing. He's, some said, he's not really the warm and fuzzy type. He's not going to want us to sing to him, But this woman was undeterred. She said, well, I'll go and sing a solo if I have to. All right? And that was it. Whether it was the Holy Spirit, a sudden surge of compassion, or maybe just Christmas guilt where your heart needs to grow 3 sizes that day. Something stirred there. Before long, they had a group ready to go. When they arrived, the staff wouldn't let them in the building because it was too late, but the pastor got to go into the room, and there were 3 or 4 or 5 nurses in there. And the group walked outside of his window and started singing. So they opened up the window, and the draft of the cold air came in, but also the beautiful voices of those gathered. And then something unexpected happened. Those nurses began to sing loudly in that room with the group outside. Then the whole room stopped and they prayed together. And then they listened more for the carolers outside. For a few moments, that room felt full of grace, full of gentleness, full of kind of love that doesn't check a person's personality before it shows up. One of the nurses whispered, I guess, I've never seen anything like this. My friend said, I haven't either. Now, I wish I could tell you that what happened right then and there was the sky opened up and soft, fluffy snowflakes fell down among the people, and the native birds and animals whisked over and brought, garland, and, put it up on the trees around. But it was a slushy, sloppy, gross day. It was cold and sleety. And they stood there and they sang. And even though nothing was picturesque about that night, the love of God prevailed. Maybe not like the Hallmark special, but because grace showed up anyway, in the mess, in the cold, in the dark. And that is exactly what Christmas is, where Christmas is born. This is why we can say tonight that we are no longer longing. We are no longer waiting for God to arrive. God is present. And the longing has been met, not with answers, all the answers we want, but with presence. And I don't talk about the kind you open, the presence of Christ that will not leave us. A light that does not flicker out, a promise that is always kept. So if you came tonight joyful, let your joy shine. If you came weary, let the light rest gently on you tonight. If you came grieving, know that God has come close enough to weep with you. The lighting of the candles represent the light of Christ. And the lighting of the candles as we spread them tonight will show the spreading of God's love, and it never disappoints. May the hope, love, peace, and joy of Christ be in your heart, and may you share it joyfully to others. Amen.